Hello and welcome to our fourth episode of the Stories of Awakening. We're really excited today to have Brenda Carolan here with us, and we're going to be discussing her path, how she found her path, where she's headed, and where she is right now. We're really excited to be with Brenda. We've had a few interactions with her before. She's part of the Lee tribe. I've also actually met Brenda before I even knew who Lee Harris was, because we had a client in common. She is a healing practitioner, I would say a shamanic practitioner. Hopefully that resonates. A teacher, an intuitive painter, a spiritual sacred tour guide in Egypt. Even my husband, who is not into the woo, was like, I need to go with her to Egypt. I was like, oh, really? So hopefully she'll talk to us a little bit about that. And yeah, we're just really excited to hear more of her story, because I've known of her work. I've actually received one of my favorite, most impactful healing sessions with her that was a gift from our mutual client. But I up to this point haven't known a lot of her stories. So I'm really excited to share, because those of us in the healing realm who do shamanic work usually come from pretty interesting background. So I'm going to start us off with a question. Brenda and I were talking a little bit about this long arm into the past. And when you're a healing practitioner, often you have to go through a lot of your own past and resolve the trauma and heal all of that and release story and explore. And so, you know, a lot of that might feel kind of done with, but in order to move forward, we want to also have a really good anchor in the past. So we're gonna start there, as we usually do. We're gonna kind of project into the past a little bit and start off with welcoming you and also inviting you to share a little bit about where you grew up and what your family situation was like, and what comes to the surface about that. Welcome, Brenda.
Hi. It is that I've done so much work for a long time that even sitting with the questions you gave me, it was interesting, just the process of what do I say and what doesn't matter, and what I talk about it a lot in sessions, because I feel very much that what I've walked through helps other people know they're not alone. Mm-hmm. And people can have this idealization of a healer, like, oh, you were born bright and shiny and your life has always been bright and shiny. And that's not quite true. The shininess is there, but a lot of times you have to go through the process of uncovering that. And I grew up in a very small town in the Midwest, and born into a family with a tremendous amount of pain and dysfunction. And I was so super sensitive, and I didn't even know I was sensitive. I mean, I didn't even know I was intuitive or psychic or anything. And I sometimes think in those kind of families where there's so much going on a daily basis, like fighting and drinking and I don't even know what, chaos, that the children often don't get nurtured into who they are. There's just not room for it. And so I did everything possible to escape, and some things were healthy and some things weren't healthy. By the time I was probably in 5th or 6th grade, I'd read every book in the young adult section in the library. I spent hours at the library. Like, that was one of my safe places. And I don't know that I ever understood really what was happening, within it all. But I also felt like I wasn't like them, even though I was in energetic and emotional reaction to some of the behaviors they had. I also always felt like weird or different or odd in the family. And I would say I didn't even know I had any gifts, but they collected antiques and always lived in old houses. And so I would feel things that freaked me out. And I would have these rituals where I would have to sleep in the middle of the bed because probably something was under my bed. And I had to have closet doors shut. and I had to have like windows or drapes shut. And if I had to go downstairs to get a drink in the middle of the night, it was this like a scurry past a certain point, because I would feel that those prickles on the back of the neck. And I knew something lived in our basement. And of course, everybody thought I was crazy to even say that something lives in our basement. But now I know something really did live in our basement. Mm-hmm. So I think too, like that, it feels so backwards to be afraid of what we feel and afraid of what we know. But at the time, that's all I had.
Yeah, so interesting. My brain goes to so many places. And of course, because I have children and I also am a shamanic practitioner, I'm thinking of my youngest child being like, the vampires in the house, they can't get me. And I'm like, there are no vampires here. If there were, I would know about it. But yeah, it's so interesting, that sensitivity, and also what you mentioned about this idea that like as children, we don't really know that what we're experiencing is bad or wrong or different, or that there's a different option, right?
Yeah.
But we come into life and it's just sort of, this is reality. We're in reality. This is the reality we plop down into. And it's interesting always to me, the basic instinctual way that kids know how to protect their energy, right? Even if it's through soul loss or disassociation or hiding, or going into books, going into imagination, like there's something, because children are so vulnerable, right? And there's some way that children instinctually know how to protect their light in those situations. So I think that that's very interesting. And I also think that, you know, from a healing perspective, always like the family we choose to come into and the circumstance we choose to come into kind of gives us that baseline, to that mud to sprout out of.
Completely. I would not be the healer I am today if I didn't have to work through the alchemy of what I came into with that family. And it is always fascinating that our essence knows how to protect itself, whether it is leaving the body or getting lost in imagination or books or whatever it is. And I worked with a brilliant therapist who does hypnotherapy and an intuitive and a spiritual guide. And her specialty was especially working with like really bright, brilliant children who were sensitive, who had been severely shut down by trauma, and then, you know, reconnecting all those parts back in together. And many times she reflected back to me how wise or brilliant I was as a child, the ways I protected myself or protected my essence. And I do think it's fascinating that we have that innate wisdom in us, even though it feels like, and it isn't, I mean, it's hell what we can go through sometimes, but within that we have the wisdom to protect our most essential self.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is amazing. It is amazing also, I think that, you know, as a parent also who I keep thinking about, one of the things I realized, you know, and I had a fairly traumatic childhood as well for a few different reasons. But as a parent, it's so easy to traumatize your children. It's so scary to not want to traumatize your children. And you think, you know, and I always think, oh my God, like I'm well educated, I'm well resourced. I've done all this self work. I know what my own trauma is. Like I'm pretty aware as a person, and still, you know, I'm failing in my own mind sometimes as a parent to be the kind of parent I really want to be. And that's heartbreaking. But to think of all the kids growing up in all the families all over the world who are so much less resourced than I am or my partner are. And it's terrifying what we can survive and what we come through. There's two things that come up that I want to reflect one thing, and then I want to send you in a deeper trajectory.
Okay.
One of the things I want to reflect is this idea that, you know, this is kind of in a juxtaposition in some ways to the last story of awakening we had with Gianna, who had a very like tight family structure, right? Like her family structure was very solid, and the belief systems were really, the template was very solid, right? So on one end of the spectrum, you have someone with a very solid container that's trying to like figure out a way of birthing themselves through a solid container. And as I was reading your blog entry, which we'll post on the website with this video, the thing that kept coming to mind was this image of like a completely fractured container, that there was no container for you.
Right.
And that you were, you know, like from the moment that you had the wherewithal to come out of hiding with your light, you were like, what container should I make for myself? Like the whole world is an oyster when you have no container that you're fighting against, right? And that has its own challenges, of course. And everyone's trying to meet in that middle place of truth at the same time. But what a different experience to come to a healer's path from a place of a completely broken container.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say there's of course, to everything we walk through, there's the positives and the negatives. And I would say, like, some of the positive aspects of that was that I could be a total free spirit. Like, I had no obligation to any parental idealization of what they wanted me to be. And I also, sometimes when you have nothing to lose, it activates the most tremendous courage in a person. And so that courage has stuck with me my entire life. Like, I can be really afraid to do some things, but in the bigger picture, I'm not afraid to just like go for it or go do something or go do a new experience. And a lot of that does come from packing up myself at the age of 23, whatever fit in my car. I had $1,000 and I went to Boulder. Never been there. I don't even know if I'd left Iowa at that point. And I made it. And so in each time I've done one of those things, no matter what it is, I've made it, because I think I made it that first time. It instilled something in me that I can at any time find resources and make it to my next step.
That's amazing. I mean, I think that like is inherent, and we'll talk more about your trips to Egypt, but I think that's kind of inherent in this, like, this new move that you're just going to Egypt and like not really knowing anyone and not really having any sort of like idea of what you were going to find, and then finding all these kindred spirits and finding all these places that feel like home, and finding a way to take other people there as well. Because I think tons of people, especially in the transformational community, dream of going to a place as energetically profound as Egypt, but just have no way of figuring out how to do that, right? It just seems so insurmountably on the other side of the world and in a different culture completely. And how do you do that? And so this actually does kind of relate to my second question, which was then if we reach through your childhood and we say, wow, Brenda like was amazing as a young child at figuring out how to protect herself and protect her light, right? Have you in your path, because I know for some healers this is more important than others, have past lives kind of come back to you as you've been going through your own process? And do you feel like there are beings that you've been before that were able to help protect that little girl that you were in this lifetime?
I would say absolutely. There's no way my little sensitive child could have made it through all those things if there weren't greater beings with me, holding my soul. And sometimes that holding the soul doesn't mean they take away the lessons from us or the learning. They're there. But as wild as I was from about the age of 14 through 27, it's a miracle I'm alive. And but I also didn't know what was healthy or unhealthy. I kind of just lived for the moment, total free spirit. I hung out with a lot of musicians and artists and partiers, and I loved every moment of it. I still hang out with artists and musicians, but in a much healthier way these days. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like there was something cohesive about my soul that a part of me knew how to walk through this in a way that did protect myself, knowing that the day would come that I would start to know how to unpack it and distill it and bring it through the alchemical process into like usable gold or usable energy for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that protection of my essence, but also it took me a long time to figure out how to protect my light as I got older and as I became an adult. And the container, really what it is that the container had been so broken. I would say the bigger work for me was to figure out how to make my own container so that my essence is contained within myself, and what that means and how precious that is.
Mm-hmm. And how did you, so two questions come up with that. One is, how did you create your container? What was that process like for you? And what place, if any, did fear play? Because I know a lot of people, their initial containers are sort of hedged in fear, right? And your descriptions of yourself as a young person and as a free spirit are very fearless sounding to me, that there wasn't that level of, I have something to lose, right? And I have to protect it. And there's expectations that others have of me, and there's fear that's been brought in on the edges of holding this container. So as you were constructing your container, if you could just share with us, like, what kind of practices or practitioners you worked with, what your process was, and if fear had any part of that, or if it was absent from that process.
Oh gosh. I think I would say that there was so much fear woven into my nervous system that I didn't even know about, that part of my process has been to have to go into all the fear in order to clear it out. And so it's almost like I was two people, fearless and fearful. And fearless in very weird ways, and so full of fear in ways that maybe other people would have been like, that's no big deal. So there was opposition within it. And there's something recently that I realized is this thing about oppositions, and I called it oppositional alchemy, because I feel like we really can't truly grow into the gold of who we are without opposition. And because then we know where one is and the other is, and there's something even beyond what I understand about why that oppositional tension can bring us into the alchemy of who we are if we do the work. And so I almost don't know. I don't know. I would say I don't know if one can exist without the other truly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds very interesting that you were able to identify that you had this like schism, right? That they were really polarized.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't weave into each other. There were these separate sort of parts of self, right? Which I think is really common in a sense for people who have experienced trauma and have like that soul loss or the disassociative sort of habits, and I definitely, that was a big part of my process, was unwrapping those instincts to disassociate, right? But yeah, I think you're right. I think there is something about that oppositional pull and that magnetism that is really interesting. And I notice even in the world when there's big like light that rises, from ceremony or from, there's big things that happen that we would say are good, and light rises. Usually darkness or something we would consider destructive rises in equal measure. And it's always like, like, wow, those things are
completely. Yes. Like that's like, oh my God, I just went to Mount Shasta and I feel amazing and my frequency's so high. And then I would come home and just be like, holy shit, what's happening?
Yeah.
But it is that it shines down into those parts so we can bring them up or look at them or dissolve them. That you really can't do one without the other if you're going to do this grounded and sustainable. And there's something to be said about grounded light versus that escapism, ethereal, almost false light.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that comes back to this idea that we were talking before about, like, for a lot of people who are, shamanic workers or transformational people, we start out in a sort of muddy, dark space, and we experience a lot of that denser sort of stuck energy or lower vibrational energy. And once we become skilled enough to get into those upper realms, the desire to dive back into those lower realms is like, not there, right? And so I used to say, like, you know, I experienced a lot of scary shit in my early years of awakening. And once I got training and I was able to get into those higher realms, I wanted to just pretend that wasn't my job, right? All that stuff on there was not mine. But that you find after a certain point, like, you really do need to understand both, and you need to be able to be courageous enough to touch both ends of the spectrum and like work that line, which brings me to alchemy. I would love for you to share a little bit more about your understanding of alchemy, what that means to you.
It is exactly that. Like, we can't come into that truly if we haven't started with the base or the root or the earth, or in Egypt they call it the chem. It is like the primordial darkness that we all have. And people are so afraid of it. And the truth is, I've worked on thousands of people, and everybody has the same stuff. It's just looks different on a spectrum. The story is different, but the frequency or the energy or the struggle, we all struggle with similar things. And so the process of that refinement, I just feel like it's like turning your coal into the diamond, and it does take work, and it does take heat and combustion and discomfort. And some people have this idea that healing is just like so blissful, like a yoga photo in a magazine, and that is not the healing process at all. Like, the true healing process can be quite messy and dismantling, but through that breaking down of that process, we can then reshape and reform and come up into that, I call it the gold of the soul. And it doesn't mean that I still don't have some of those shadowy parts. I don't know if we ever get rid of them while we're still in a body. It's always a process of refinement. And it isn't linear. Like, it feels like it's spiral. So you might think you've finished something, and all of a sudden you find yourself back in it, but in a different place on that spiral. And that's just, I feel like that's just soul growth. Like, that is part of it. And I think the acceptance of that also helps us relax into the process instead of being afraid of the process.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the key word there, is process.
Yeah.
That we're so like product oriented as a society, and so like outcome oriented, as if life could be chunked into these little bento boxes of experience, right? But somehow, you know, it's this continual process of growth, and it's not a destination. It's a continual uncovering.
Mm-hmm.
I love I don't know where I heard this from, but this idea that, you know, when we are born or when we're being formed as young children, it's like we're a tool that's been alchemized from these different alloys, these different metals have come together. And the process of healing is bringing that into the alchemical fire of transformation and melting it back down to its elemental parts, and then bringing it back together in a way that creates a tool that you want to use in the world, not something that was formed for you by your circumstances. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that can be very painful. And there is a lot of heat, and there is a lot of breakdown, right? Like, that breakdown, breakthrough sort of idea is inherent in the process of healing. And I don't think that healers can really go through the process of becoming healers unless they've gone through their own.
Not at all. No, that is our medicine. Like, that is the pathway to the medicine that we carry. And we can have the potential of having medicine that we carry, but to really come into the power of the medicine you carry, you have to go through that. I won't go to healers that haven't gone through something or come out the other side of something, because I know they've done their walk, and I know they now carry their medicine in a very different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a collection of things that you bring from the outside to offer. Like, really, that universal truth is found everywhere, but we have to like be that, right? It has to be in our cells and our body to be able to really offer it. I love that. Okay, let's see where the conversation wants to go.
Okay.
I did see before this sort of weaving action that was happening and elevating. So let's go back to process. They're saying process. So let's talk about the process of transformation for you right now, because I know that you've gone through a pretty big year of transformation, even in your business and what your output is. And you've struck some like cosmic gold with your like I have been watching with such delight as people that I know within the community are going to your classes with no experience and doing these amazing intuitive paintings and feeling so transformed by the experience of creation. I think that creative expression is such an important form of self-care and an important part of processing energy all the way through our bodies, that I would love to hear how you came upon this for yourself and how this became one of your offerings.
I've always used art. Like I didn't even know I was an artist, and I didn't even really know I was creative. And then going back into the past, there was a time when I went through a pretty intensive 2-year dark night of the soul. And a therapist told me I was too depressed to help. And it was when antidepressants were just coming out. And so I was a true guinea pig, and I did not do well on any of them. In fact, I felt crazier on the medication than just sitting in the darkness of the depression. And so that was actually, I tried all kinds of things, and journaling and art were one of those things. And I did it in a very raw, self-taught way. I didn't go to art school, but I think that was the beginning of teaching me that art is a tool for healing, and it moves energy, and it is, for me, much more process related than an academic thing we do. And so off and on over the years, I've painted, and it always has been, like, I think the combination of healer-artist is one of the best, because we are so intimate with other people that when I paint, it gives me a chance to be really intimate with my own soul and my own self. And so it's medicine for myself, but then it becomes medicine for other people in a really different way. Mm-hmm. And probably about 5 years ago, and I had painted, and I had art shows like in my old life, but differently, not like the ones, not at all what I do now. And about 5 years ago, my artist showed up, and she's like, "Hey, I want to be in the front seat. Like, you have given your healer like the last almost 2 decades of workshop attention. You fed her, you've taken care of her. I'm like nothing. Like, I need that level of being taken care of now." And so I started taking workshops here and there, and I was always attracted to the ones that they were either intuitive painting or painting from your soul, or more just from pure expression. And so I've probably taken about 5 workshops, but for the most part, really just self-taught and just followed what came through me. And I think it helps significantly that I've worked with energy for years, so that painting this way wasn't really hard. But the whole energy painting thing started probably a little over a year ago when, and I got asked to do a lot of things last year, and I said yes to all of them. And I knew my soul would be so stretched, but I knew that at the end of that year, I would know what fit and what didn't fit. And what I didn't know was that my soul was leading me through a sequence of experiences that would all then become the pieces of creation to my next website. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing was doing the live painting at Lee's events. And I'd never done anything like that, but I had such trust in him, and he had trust in me as an artist and a friend. So I just kind of followed guidance and was like, okay, I'm going to get little canvases. I'm going to sit on the side of the stage, and I'm just going to see what happens. And there was a part of me that was like, well, shit, what if only one painting comes out? Or what if nothing comes out? Like, I've never painted in front of people that way. But I just grounded down in, made my little world. And of course, it's so easy. It was so easy because of his energy and his team and I think just the quality of people that comes to his events anyway, to just kind of open up and go into like trance. And at first it was a little weird because things were coming out that are not my normal paintings or my normal colors or my normal style. So there's this moment where it's like, okay, I gotta let go. I can't be personality me painting. I just have to be pure channel painting for these people. And what was so surprising was people were saying, oh my God, that's my guide. Or I was having a very emotional experience as you were painting that certain piece. And so that was kind of the beginning of like, wait, this energy painting, there's something really to it. And then I did it in Santa Fe with him. And then after that, I just kept painting energy, like, whoa, there's something very different. I'm not painting as my old self anymore. I'm painting from soul, like really painting from soul, and I'm really painting from channel and painting from energy. And so that's kind of how it all came into play. I started teaching it this year and had no idea it would take off like wildfire. And so there is an excitement around this painting from a very different place. But how it's so different. It's not academic. It's not from the mental at all. Part of what I take people through is also clearing all the conditioning that we all have as creatives. Like so many of us have been told we can't draw, we can't paint, we're not an artist, because we are already connected to creation and creation frequency. We are already creators and creatives, and we do it every day in all kinds of forms. So it's just taking that frequency, opening up the body, clearing the conditioning, and bringing people into a place of painting from that direct place.
I love that. I love the tactile nature, right, of bringing that movement of energy, that connection with source, that connection with higher self, connection with the soul, and that creative nature, like bringing that forward and actually using it to create something external, right? And doing it from a really intentional place, giving people the freedom to do that, because we do all have, pretty strong conditioning one way or another that keeps us back from expressing ourselves. I used to love teaching collage for that reason, because it's like, there's no talent necessary for this job, like you use people's images. But that ability to move color and shape around is such a fundamental human desire. And you can see kids who don't have the conditioning yet do it quite naturally, right? Like it's a quite natural expression, a free expression of what they're feeling or what they're thinking. So I think it's understandable at this point in our very accelerated transformational growth process as a collective that there would be a ton of people really thirsty and hungry for that work. So that's really, really cool that you're offering that, and that people are finding you and responding in such a huge way. So I definitely encourage people to check that out. Could you talk a little bit more about your website? Because I know your website's been a transformational experience for you to create a physical, visual representation and a functional representation of all your work and how your work is changing.
It has been such a process again. And my site that's up now is like, it feels like this represents this much of me. And even at that, it's very cobbled together, because about 2 years ago, I had hired a person who somehow completely deleted all my files. And so I even had to go back like about 4 years and find my previous designer. And luckily he had some of them saved. And so it's not easy when your frequency is a certain way and your website does not represent that. And so I've been in a process with a designer, and it's been amazing. He's this grounded, brilliant magician who can take what I say and put it into design, and I feel like he's nailed it. And then now we're working with a coder who is very left brain. So he's having to take what the two visionaries created and bring it down into functional form. And it has not been an easy process. And it's the first time I've ever been so involved in my website. And they have asked me so many questions of clarification that has actually been very beneficial, although not always easy. And so I started a rebrand probably about a year ago. And at that point, it was just about logo and new labels. And I had no idea that I would start to grow this much. And I had no idea that then I would move into this new home and that my old structure would completely just dissolve out. And luckily, my little team has been patient with me through all this. So we're planning a soft launch for the 15th when the interview comes out. And then we had to just be realistic. Like, we're going to have to do this in increments because this will include, there's videos, there's things about sacred travel, there's an Egyptian marketplace from all the things I've gone and purchased from different artists and alchemists in Egypt. There's live painting, there's the painting classes, working with children. So magically, these two guys have helped me take all these different things and weave them into a cohesive whole. So it's super excited. And it actually feels like finally I have a true representation of myself in the world in a very fun, bright, dynamic way. So that's been that process.
Beautiful. And I anticipate it'll continue to sort of evolve over time, right? Because you're continuing to evolve and you're in such a high paced, you as a healer are on that healing trajectory still, as we always are, hopefully, if we're being honest with ourselves.
Completely.
And our practice, and we as a collective of beings right now are going through a really huge upshift that's continual. So it's this interesting image of, doing the soft launch and then, releasing these other pieces. And then as you turn over these different stones, the tectonic plates around us are moving. And so we don't even know how that's going to, uncover itself over time. But I'm one of the people watching and being like so delighted by what you're putting out there and so excited to experience it on some level or another in the coming months and years.
Thank you. Thank you. It has, it's super exciting. I feel like I'm finally the me that I came here to be. So there is like all that clearing, all that healing, all that dissolving out of the trauma. It's like I always wondered how do I see these other people doing it? Like, how do they do it? And now I understand, like, it does require sometimes a lot of healing or shifting, and especially trauma imprints, to finally be able to birth yourself in the way that your soul came here to do it. And then there is like all the energy coming on the planet, the astrology, the everything is pushing us to be even more of a leader or more available, more visible. And so there's that, just getting over yourself and finally getting out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people are getting that call right now. And I think it's, one of the things I was talking to a friend about is how challenging it is for healers and creatives to know how to do that process. A lot of us are not also master marketers and entrepreneurs, and, we're not used to having to be that visible or that successful in our visibility, we'll say. And so I almost wish that, if there's a call, if anyone knows of people out there, amazing marketing and entrepreneurial people who like that is their juju, that is their creative like spice of life, that are looking for a purpose. Like, there are so many of us healers and creatives out there that are getting the strong call to become the leaders, to lead the way. But we are used to being, nuggety and small and sort of like on the fringes. And now we're being asked into the center and we don't really know how to do that. And so there is a learning curve that I'm finding for myself that can be pretty frustrating at times, but that call is so strong that we continue to follow it. So, and we're showing, the way, this is a strange analogy, but the way that New Zealand is responding to the recent mass shooting, they're showing the world a really new way of going about this process of healing and restoration. And we are, as healers, we're showing a new way to be in business and be in truth, right? And
Yes.
be in our own process still, and acknowledge that our process, because it's shifting, will shift the business, which will shift us. And that's going to be a continual process. And probably there's never going to be a moment, I know for my own website, which I've been working on a lot for many months, there's never probably going to be a point of like, it's done.
No. I don't think so. Not in evolution. And if you're part of this evolutionary ride, no. And then, it isn't easy. Like, I feel like I'm just following something. I don't even know what I'm following, breadcrumbs or my soul. And I do feel it's overwhelming, the amount of things to learn sometimes. So then you get better at, I'll just hire this person, or I'll just hire this person, or what do I really feel like learning, or what percentage do I need to learn to make it work? Because a lot of times we don't need to know the whole thing. We just need a little piece of it that can help us in business. But definitely it has not been my strong point, but I'm being pushed into it. And then you get more confidence, and it actually feels pretty good to start to understand it and to become more empowered with it, because it sucks to not feel empowered in business when you've got all these gifts and you've got all this stuff, and people will say, well, why aren't you out there more? And it's like, oh my God, you don't even know the struggle. I wish I was out there more.
Yeah, I think that empowerment is kind of the key word. And it's a funny thing, it's a backwards sort of, not backwards because there's no linear way to it, but for those of us who've been working for a really long time to become empowered in our lives in general, that to then go, now I need to become empowered in being able to interface with the mainstream. And I've been really comfortable being on the fringes, or really comfortable walking away from the herd and being like, I'm just going on this tangent over here because that's where my soul's leading me. Now our souls are leading us back to the center, and we're like, oh, really empowered by being confident and interfacing with the general public and where the general public is in the world of social media and technology and evolution. And that this process that seems pretty universal of like digging through the heart and trying to figure out how to be whole. So the last question that's coming up right now is balance. For you, as you're working so hard and your life is so full and there's so much, I know you're going to, is it tomorrow that you're going to Egypt?
Saturday I leave for Egypt again.
So there's tons going on in your world. How do you take care of yourself? Like, what is your current practice in self-care and creating that balance?
There's a lot, and I've learned it over the years and honed it. And there are specific things, like my living space is a sanctuary, and that is one of the things that it's my container. And there's a lot I never let in, and there's things I do, like I play binary beats or some sort of frequency music 24/7 just to keep it at a certain frequency that's working on me or holding me. I eat really healthy. I mean, I think that's just, I have to. And it doesn't mean I'm an extreme person about it. Like, I think the 80-20 model works. Like 80% of the time, I'm fantastic. But sometimes I slide a little. We all do. And I don't get weirdo about that either. I surround myself with people that inspire me and that reflect back who I am. I really have done a lot of work around boundaries and drainers. Like, drainers are not allowed in my life. I can't afford it. I can't energetically afford it. I think sleep, getting good rest, and then of course making sure I have significant time to paint. And then going to sacred places always fills my soul up. So that seems to be in all the things that we can choose from. Those are the things that keep me bright or keep me recharged.
I love the full spectrum nature that you engage with your container, and understanding your home as an extension of that sacred space, as that sacred container itself, because we are so influenced by our environments, right? And reflected by our environments as well. So that's fantastic advice for everyone. I want you to, we'll have this all on the website right below your video, but let us know your website address so that people can get to you, and an offer that you would like to offer the community.
Yes.
If you have any explanation for that. And if that's undecided yet, that's okay too.
Yes. So my website, the soft launch will be live on the 15th. And it's www.brendacarolan.com. I changed it. It used to be Dendera Healing Arts. And a funny thing happened. Once I went to Egypt, I felt like now I can just have my name. So that was, and I think part of the I don't know, dissolution of the old business also just like, I feel like I can just be me now. And so that's my website. I would like to offer everybody 20% off of healing sessions, and I do them either in person in Portland, phone, Skype, Zoom, any of them work just as powerfully, and 20% off of any of the healing or the intuitive painting classes. And currently I do them mostly in Portland. And I do private, or I do classes, small, intimate classes of 6. But I am very open to experimenting with how that would look like on Skype or Zoom. And I know it would work just as well. So those are my offerings.
Wow, that's so exciting, Brenda. I love that. Thank you. I might have to take you up on some of that, actually. I'm dying to take one of your painting classes.
They're so fun. They're really fun. And I think that's it. When you've been a healer for a long time, you spend a considerable amount of time in other people's pain. And I'm really good at it, and I know how to transmute it, and I don't take it on. But something kind of shifted in me a couple years ago, and it's like, you know what? I think I've done enough of that. I would much rather use my energy to inspire and activate people so they can, I don't know, the avenue of art and creativity is such a more fun way to move energy.
And I think that ultimately we need to be teaching people how to heal themselves, right? I think that there are plenty of healers out there for all the people that need healing, but I think that ultimately healing, it's like an ayahuasca ceremony, you know, like, it's not something you go and you put in and that's it, right? And you're done. Yeah. It's a door opening to a process that has to be continued on a daily basis. And just like meditation isn't just sitting for 30 minutes and meditating, it's the way you start to live your life is in connection with the meditative state. And so I think it's wonderful to share your gifts, your quite significant gifts. And I'm staring at this beautiful painting that's right behind you, but your significant gifts with art to open that door for people so that they can really heal themselves on a daily basis. They have that tool. It's not something they need someone else to be the usher for. It's something that they can usher in for themselves on a regular basis.
Yes. Yeah, it's so important. I think even too, the journeys to Egypt, again, it's like I'm facilitating an experience. And it's kind of up to each person how deep into that they want to go. I would say the same thing with painting or anything I do. And going to Egypt is another form of, I'm holding the space and I brought in all these ingredients, but it's a really potent opportunity to really come into your own personal power and more of your gifts. And I'm not necessarily doing it, but I'm bringing you to some places that can do it in a pretty major way. And I like it. I like it better facilitating an experience where they get to activate their own medicine, because it is so much more empowering for them and way less work for me.
Well, and it's the appropriate reconfiguration of power and responsibility, which is a huge part of the transformation we're going through right now as humanity, because we've understood for a really long time what it looks like to do power over, for one person to have the power and everybody else to follow and to be healed or to be led. And that's not actually the way that nature works. That's not actually the way the universe works. We are co-creative beings in a co-creative universe on a co-creative planet. And it's hard to learn that, but what you're doing for people is everything. To be able to hold a container for someone, to be able to curate an experience and to say, okay, now it's your power and responsibility how you're going to activate within this container. And I, you know, in your experience of learning how to create a container from scratch and how to hold it exactly the way you want it, that is what people need. And then for them to feel their own power of activation, they get to choose the depth, they get to choose the medicine that they're going to create. And that's really wonderful.
Yeah, that's you nailed it. You said it so beautifully. That is exactly part of the transition or transformation that we're in. And I really do feel like we're all meant to be self-contained. It's old. Nobody should be riding on anybody's energy ever. Everybody has essence. We all have all the same accessibility. It's just a matter of building it and holding it and then sharing it. But yeah, we're definitely in a new place with all of it, and it feels so much better.
It does. It feels so right. It feels so right. Oh, this word came in, self-responsibility. This will be my last. I always say that, then it's never the last. But I'll just drop in the bucket, which is that, you know, I love the way that Pema Chodron, who, you know, is a Tibetan Buddhist nun, she's one of my favorite teachers. I just love her teaching. She's so down to earth, and it comes from her own reconfiguration, her own experience, her own vulnerability. And she is constantly in process. She's like 82 now, and she's still, you know, she's with herself, and she's very much in love with her imperfection of her experience. But it's so beautiful. But she talks about Sangha, which is one of the three sort of components of awakening, and it's community, basically. But the way she describes it is it's a community of self-responsible individuals. It's not necessarily a community of people all practicing the same thing, right? The same form of connection. It's just everyone who is willing to be self-responsible and then show up for each other in the sense of reflection, seeing each other. Right. And that is, I think, what so many of us yearn for. We just yearn to be seen and heard, and not have to hand over our power and responsibility to someone else, and have someone else try to take responsibility for us and our pain. But just to be witnessed and to be in a community of people doing that sounds like the yummiest, most desirable thing for me to throw those seeds into the future of, like, that is what's starting to emerge, and that's what we're going to see more of, and that's what we're going to create more of, and that's what we're going to try to cultivate in ourselves, is our ability to do that, to know how to be self-responsible.
Yeah, it gives me goosebumps because it is all true. And when I moved into the home I'm living in now, which is like a live-work urban sanctuary, and the home wants community here. And at first I was like, oh, the stickiness of community, I don't know if I can do it. But exactly what you just said, that type of community, I can loosely facilitate and attract the people that are self-responsible and self-contained. And there's not a stickiness or a dependence either way. And that really is the new too. And that there's such a clean vibration and vitality that comes from being able to facilitate that way.
It's joyous. It's a joyous kind of learning that we all need to engage in. Thank you so much, Brenda. I really, really appreciate you jumping on board here and sharing your story with us. I'm so excited for more people to be engaged. I mean, as many people as you can hold, but engaging in your amazing offerings, because you have so many amazing offerings. And I know Brenda just very lightly didn't actually go into the description of it, but for anyone who hasn't met Brenda or been to an event or been to her office, she has these amazing elixirs and sprays and alchemical magic perfumes from Egypt and all this like super yummy, sensual high-powered stuff. I know I got a grounding spray from you in Portland last year, and like used it like on my kids. I was like, you need some grounding, like let's get your body, like you picked up some funkiness from school. Used it like it was gold. I love that stuff. And so I know that was part of, you mentioned that part of your rebranding started with redoing your labels and making those more resonant, and that it kind of tumbled from there into these other areas. But yes, I'm looking forward to those. Will be available online, I'm anticipating.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, there will be an Egyptian market that has the sacred perfumes from 5th and 6th, 7th generation alchemists that, oh my God, they're so beautiful. And then the line of temple sprays and oils that I create, that I feel like I made them for myself first, so I could even just deal with being in this world as a sensitive. But they are frequency tools, even though they smell great, just to help us navigate as sensitive and empaths in this world. And then the marketplace will have other things I've found from local artists in Egypt, and jewelry, and what else? Crystals that I found in Egypt. So there will be, in increments, the birthing of this will happen. So just stay tuned. If you're excited and you go to the site and you see coming soon, that means it is coming, but we just can't get everything on it at once.
Absolutely. Well, we want people going back to the website. As we said before, the website is this like evolving expression of the work, and the work is evolving. So, when we find those websites that really feed us, then we should be going back often to sort of see what's new, what's coming up.
Yeah, I see them almost as an invitation into a growing experience, because that's what I am. I'm a growing experience, and like the websites that are stagnant or linear, I just don't think that's the way right now, that it is interactive and shifting and changing, because that's what we're in.
Absolutely. Agreed. Wholeheartedly. I feel like I want to give you a high 10, like through. Good job. Yes. Thank you so much. Brenda, we hope that you have a wonderful trip to Egypt and that it's nourishing to your soul. I know that you're going for personal reasons and you're going to be meeting a good friend there. And I hope that it is just the most wonderful, nourishing trip for you. And I'm very excited on the 15th when this comes out to see your new website and to engage with that, and possibly check out what it would be like to do an online painting class with you. Because I'm not sure with my big pregnant belly if Portland is in the works for me in the next month. But I have started incorporating more painting and drawing into my daily practice of self-care, and I would love some direction on that.
Yeah. Fantastic. It could easily be done by Skype. Easily.
That would be awesome. And I'm enthralled by Zoom. Honestly, I use Zoom so much for individual and group calls. And I'm like, video is awesome. It's helpful to do this energy work.
Oh my God, it's so fun. It's so fun that we are in different places, but we're hanging out. Yeah, I really do love the modern world a lot.
It has some benefits. It has some definite benefits, and we should be using it for the highest good. So I think we're doing that right now. And I so appreciate you spending your morning with me on this very busy week that you're having. And so I'm sending you a huge hug. And
thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we will just look forward to hearing more and more about what's going on in your world. This was your 4th episode of Stories Awakening, and the doorbell is ringing. How exciting. Thank you everyone for joining us.